Good afternoon and welcome to our webinar where we'll be unpacking insights from the recent study, Bridging the Advancement Gap, What Employees Want and What Employers Think They Want, which focuses on frontline worker mobility in the United States. My name is Sarah Wasserteil and I'm Managing Director of Expansion at Cara Collective and co-author of this report. I'm also joined by Andrew Davis, a partner at McKinsey focused on retail operations, and Cornisha, a Cara alumni who's been able to advance in frontline roles in the healthcare industry. For those who are not familiar with Cara, we are a 30-year-old workforce development organization that helps untapped talent obtain, retain, and advance in quality jobs. Many of our clients have been locked out of economic opportunity and mobility because they gain skills in ways other than getting a four-year degree, have been impacted by the criminal justice system, or faced other barriers that have prevented them from moving up in their careers. My team, Cara Plus, takes the insights we've learned from moving job seekers into more than 13,000 jobs with 70 companies every year to help companies better reach, retain, and advance untapped talent pools that can contribute to their companies. Now for a little bit of housekeeping before we get started. Because we are using YouTube to live stream this talk, none of the attendees are on video today, so take a breath, relax, we can't see you. And also because this recording is being live streamed, we are only going to take Q&A through the chat. So feel free to use the YouTube chat in your window to ask any questions, and we'll try to answer as many as possible at the end of the presentation. With that, I want to pivot over to Andrew Davis to give a little bit of background on the study. So over to you, Andrew.
Thank you so much. Hopefully everybody can hear me okay. Just thank you so much for the introduction, Sarah, and it's a pleasure to get to be with you and to not see all of the attendees here. I agree. It's a bit different than the Zoom worlds that a lot of us are used to. I just wanted to take a couple of minutes to talk through why we did this research, what matters, and what we learned from it. And hopefully most of you had an opportunity to leaf through it ahead of time. If you have any questions, please pepper them into the comments and into the chat, and we'll monitor them. So as Sarah said, I'm a partner with McKinsey out of our Chicago office. I spend nearly all of my time doing work with frontline worker populations, largely within retail and in other spaces. And I've had the pleasure of getting a chance to work with Cara over the past year and a half as we've gone through this. A couple of things that we wanted to think through, or that was on our minds as places that we just didn't know enough about as a group of people, and places where we didn't have all of the insights that we needed to in order to go and help frontline populations continue to advance in their lives. The first is, what do frontline workers actually prioritize and what matters to them? And maybe just as importantly, if not more so, where are there gaps to what employers think they need to prioritize versus what they should? I work with large employers all the time who all are talking about this problem. And before this research came out, we really didn't have a great grasp in terms of where are their gaps and what can employers do to go and make this better. The second big piece that we were thinking through is, when people apply for new roles or apply for jobs or get promotions, what is actually happening and how do they go and understand those things? So one of the other things that I hear and see all the time is frontline workers not having a clear view of what it actually takes to go and advance, and employers on the flip side saying, oh, we give everybody everything that they would ever need to go and do that. So how do we bridge that gap? And then finally, across both of these principles, what can we actually do to go and help employers of any scale, any size, any industry do to go and improve the lives and livelihoods of this population? Can we kick to the next slide, please? Just a bit of an overview on what the research was. I won't drain all of the boring bullets that are spread out in a lot more detail within the survey itself, but we wanted to get a really, really large sample size here in order to cut the data a bunch of different ways. So we actually went and talked to about 2,200 workers and job seekers across a bunch of different verticals, a bunch of different industries: customer service, financial and professional services, retail, logistics, distribution centers, manufacturing. We wanted to get as broad of a swath of the frontline worker population as we possibly could. We did make sure that as we were going through this, that our population within the survey wasn't wildly off from the frontline worker population in the US, and it is not. The second thing that we did to go and answer that third question that was on the last slide is we wanted to actually go and talk to people who have control over some of these things within corporations of all different sizes. So we actually talked to about 300 different managers and decision makers who specialize in frontline talent, in hiring them, in helping promote them, in supporting them in any ways that they can, in order to be able to tie some of these responses one-to-one to see what's working and what's not. Let's go to the next slide. 4 big things. If I were to take away 4 things from this, here's what I would take away, and we'll get into each of them on an individual basis. The first is around that first question around what is advancement and what matters to frontline workers. We do see some pretty meaningful differences with some nuance in terms of what employees actually want and what employers think they want. Things like compensation are not going to surprise anybody here. It's something that we've talked about a whole lot within the pandemic, and there's been lots and lots of research around attrition and attraction. I think one of the things that does pop slightly differently is the job growth opportunities. And what we mean by that is giving folks an opportunity to grow within their job, find something new, continue to advance, have upward mobility was the most important thing to this frontline worker population. Employers think that's important too, but not to the same level of extent. The second big thing that we think about is there are a bunch of places where employers over think that certain attributes actually matter more to this population than do. The main one being job titles. So we'll talk about that in a few minutes as we go through this. Additionally, advancement is one of the main top 2 reasons that people cite for leaving a job over the last year. I mean, everybody knows that we're in record low unemployment rates. How do we think through attracting and retaining talent is a huge problem everywhere. So how do we think about advancement as one of those really, really good ways that we can go and keep wonderful people around is something that we should be thinking about. The second big takeaway, and some of this did surprise me, is not that frontline workers are motivated, but to the extent that in how many of them actually want to go and continue to progress and go and advance within their companies. Over 70% of the population that we surveyed was actively applying or had applied to in the last year advancement opportunities. This is a motivated group of people who want to do more. And very importantly, people who have had adverse experiences in their life, who have been involved in the criminal justice system, tend to apply at even higher rates than that 70 and achieve better success. So if we are looking as an employer base for where can we go and find folks that are going to be wonderful and can help them go and grow, there are tons of people within this population that want more and we can support them better. The third piece, and this hits the second question from the prior page, is employers consistently overrate on basically every single attribute the ability and awareness of what tools they give to their frontline populations. So what I mean by that, I'll use a very specific example. We hear employers talk all the time about tuition reimbursement. Employers will always overestimate just how many of their people know about that and how much it applies to them. There's a huge communication gap on what career pathing looks like and how to go and support folks from what employers say that they think folks know to what people actually know who are working in the field. And then finally, we will hit this at the end, and I'd love any questions on it. But we do talk about some really practical things that employers can do to go and help with this, largely around communication, which won't be surprising. How do we think about investment in skill building, which is not just side of the desk or on a computer. It can be live career building and skill building in person. And how do we meaningfully help them think about what those career paths look like? Let's go to the next slide. This is a bit of an eyesore and an eye chart, as I know, but I am a consultant, so I have to have at least one slide in here that's a little bit difficult to read. The way to read this slide, and it is in the report, is on the left axis or the y-axis, what is most important to employees? And then on the x-axis, or the one that's horizontal, what do employers think is most important to them? And we see a couple of places where there are really, really big gaps or nuanced gaps. The first is employers really do place much more emphasis, if you look at that bottom right dot, the black one, on job titles. Job titles are something that are actually pretty easy for employers to go and change, but frontline workers don't care about them. So that might work for other parts of the population. Let's not think about it as much in this case. The second is thinking about having the right skill set for the job. So if you look in that aligned skill set bucket, which is in the top right hand corner, people again and again tell us that they want to know that they're going to do their job well, and they want to be given the right training and resourcing to go and do an amazing job. That's hard, and it's something that employers don't prioritize enough. And then finally, job growth chances and the ability to go and continue to rise up within an organization and continue to advance within your career is the number one thing that frontline employees want. That is about the number 4 or 5 thing that employers think that they want. Let's move on to the next slide. We recently did a refresh of some research on attrition and attraction, given how tight the labor market is right now. And there's a bunch of it on our website. If you're interested, can send it to you. But this is also incredibly important when it comes to why folks have quit their jobs. And I mean, you can't really read anything online or in the newspapers without coming across statistics around who's quitting and leaving and going to different jobs. The number one reason that people said that they quit their jobs in the last year is because they had a lack of career advancement opportunities within this frontline population. That's absolutely critical. Of course, compensation matters and having an inspirational leadership matters, but the fact that this advancement piece was number one is critical. Let's go to the next slide. We talked a bit in the second bullet around, look, like who advances and who's trying to advance. And I think one of the things that was absolutely really, really interesting to us as we were going through this is, again, 70+% of people actually applied for more promotions or more responsibility within their job. That is a huge percentage of this population. The vast, vast majority of people want to do more and want to help more. I think a couple of things that really, really spiked here are, one, women are about 1.3x less likely to apply for promotions if you look at that second line, but achieve those promotions at greater rates than men. So there's something clearly going on there that we can go and help with. And then we already talked about the criminal justice involvement point. Folks who have had adverse experiences in their life apply to and achieve promotions and get more responsibility at higher rates than the general population. So how do we think about, as an employer base, bringing this to life and helping them out and helping everybody out in tow? Let's go to the next slide. One or two things that we also thought were really, really interesting. People who do advance are much more likely to be aware of the opportunities, despite the fact that, broadly speaking, employers really, really overestimate how much folks know about this. When people do advance, they have had many more manager-led advancement conversations than they have if you haven't advanced. And they tend to receive much higher positive feedback from their managers. All of this leads to a similar vein around over-communicate, let people know how they're doing, improve the feedback culture, and really, really help folks understand the types of things that your organization really, really values for somebody to go and take on the next role and what they can go and do to help. And I think it's really important to say, yes, on the left-hand side, great. When people do these things, people advance at high rates. But 65% of them are really unaware of how to go and achieve this. And that's a huge gap that we can go and help fix. Let's go to the next slide. Hitting on this point around employers consistently overestimating the availability of resources. This is a bit hard to read here, but each one of these bars is a resource that an employer gives to its worker population. So it can be formal learning of education in the top left bucket, certifications and training. It can be informal learning from coworkers and on-the-job monitoring, which is on-the-job mentoring, which is the top right bucket. It is really, really understanding better versions of career pathing and written descriptions of what the next job looks like, which is the bottom left. And then there's a bunch of flexibility on working models that, again, has become a huge thing, a bigger thing within COVID than it did even before. In every single one of those buckets and with every single attribute that we looked at, employers overrated how much they thought that their employee population knew about this. And we know that there's been lots of communication, lots in the news around how to go and support folks, but fully 1 in 5 people said that their employer offered literally no resources to prepare them for anything. We know that that's not true. Every employer out there is doing everything that they can and are trying to do to go and support these populations, but clearly some of it's not working. So how do we go and help them communicate that better? And then finally, there is a huge gap in employer perception on advancement resources across every single category. And informal learning is something that we'll talk about in a little bit, of how to give folks practically a view into what this job could look like or what experiences could look like to go and help. Let's kick to the next slide. I won't drain this one. It is in the report, but there is every single industry that we went deep in. And again, there's about 6 of them here: customer service, hospitality, retail, et cetera, had their own individual nuances. I'll just hit 1 or 2 of them. Retail, the most important attribute is job growth within retail, which is similar to other places. But communication during interviews ended up being something that they mattered a lot more to folks. Within healthcare, actually having the right skill set mattered most, which is really, really interesting. Some of these jobs can tend to be a bit more technical, and giving people the resources that they need to know that they're going to do an amazing job is really, really critical. Let's kick to the next one. So what do employers do? And I know we're going to talk about a lot of this over the next 45 minutes or so. The first is communicate, communicate, communicate. What we've learned from research over the past 20 or 30 years is that folks need to be, adults need to be told the same thing dozens of times in order for it to truly sink in. And there's been lots and lots of work on adult learning principles that we can share as well. But just telling somebody one time in an interview, hey, these 5 cool resources exist, is something that probably they won't remember over time. And it has nothing to do with that person. It's just human nature. So how do we continue to reiterate, hey, by the way, in your 3-month check-in, have you tried these 5 resources? Hey, by the way, in an end of week email or communication from your team lead, have you tried these things, is really, really critical. The second is skill building really, really matters, because we want to go and make sure that folks can align, that have confidence that the skills that they have will help them do a wonderful job. So you can do this on the fly within the job by going and doing on-the-job training. You can do this through more formalized training channels on a computer or an iPad. And then I think that just continual reminders from management and other folks who've been in the role a bit longer on the types of ways of doing things and how to go and continue to do a really, really good, or some tips and tricks on how to do a better job, is really critical. I was just talking with a couple of frontline employees a couple of days ago on how they felt about a new process that one of my clients had run. And basically all of them said that they didn't have it communicated enough, and they didn't feel confident in it. So they backslid and went to the old way. The way to go fix that is to tell them time and time again and help them work through and show them what to go and do. The third is, how do we equip managers to support their teams and grow their teams? So everybody, and this will not be surprising, but having a supportive manager really, really does matter. It matters everywhere throughout the entire chain. We need to make sure that we're continuing to give training to people to become effective managers. We need to make sure that we support people who are doing a really, really good job of prioritizing people's development and help that become a part of what it takes to be a great person within your organization. The final 2 are all around how do we prioritize preferences in determining incentives. So there is a nuanced view of what matters to different groups of people. There's a lot more detail on this, and an interactive, clickable link within the report. So I highly suggest that if you guys haven't done that, to go through it. There's a little game that we created that we really like. I hope that you guys like it as much as we did. But how do we think about the benefits that actually matter to the part of the workforce that you all are engaging in? And then finally, we want to always, always, always think about investing in workers who are eager to grow and advance. We know that a huge percentage of these people want to go and grow. We also know that folks who come from less traditional backgrounds for these jobs, without 4-year college degrees, without 2-year college degrees, want to advance at higher rates than the folks that are even within those. So how do we communicate, 1, what is actually needed in order to go and get this job? And then 2, once you're here, how do we think about loosening some of those restrictions around what it might have taken in the past to go and advance to a role, when all that really matters is how are they doing today and what is their potential?
Thank you so much, Andrew. Now, we just had the opportunity to learn a little bit about the findings in the report, which surveyed more than 2,000 workers and 300 employers across the country. Now I want to shift it to a frontline worker who we've had the privilege of working with, Cornisha. Now, Cornisha, when you came to Cara several years ago, you weren't just looking for a job, you were looking for a career. If you don't mind, can you just spend a few minutes introducing yourself and what brought you to Cara, what type of job you moved into after your time at Cara, and how you've been able to advance within that company?
Okay, thank you so much, Sarah. Okay, for those of you who do not know me, my name is Cornisha, and I came to Kara not only for looking for a job, a career, I came to Kara looking for a new way of life as well. And I found it. I'm happy I found it. I came to Kara through a women's shelter. I was referred by Sister House. I was suffering from addiction and I was battling addiction at the time, but I came to Kara sober and ready to get to work. And through Kara, I just learned how important it is, how important community is, how important it is for people to believe in you and pour into you so you can believe in yourself. And it was in Kara that I learned to believe in myself. And I'm so grateful for that because now I pour into others the way that people from Kara poured into me. And I spent, I believe, 3 months at Kara. I went through transformations and I spent 2 months looking for a job before I found my job in the healthcare industry at a hospital. And while I was there, I believe I worked for 3 years in one department. And I had the opportunity after that 3 years to advance to another department, which was a much bigger improvement than my initial department. But I'm grateful for both because they serve their purpose. And I learned so much professionally and personally in both. So now I am looking to fulfill my career, like desires and everything, looking to continue to grow.
Thank you so much for sharing part of your story, Cornisha. It's always so exciting to hear about people who've had the opportunity to advance, to get promoted in your role. And yet, per the report, what we heard from Andrew earlier was that 70% of frontline workers have applied for advancement opportunities, and yet only 25% have been successful. And you're in that 25%. Can you talk a little bit about what that experience was like for you? Did you feel supported in finding new opportunities, either in your own department or into the department that you moved into? What else contributed to your success in getting promoted?
So like finding my initial job at Kara in the first department, it was the same thing. It was people. It was people who believed in me. I believed in my manager supported me like once I had already started going through the process of turning over, but there wasn't a conversation with my manager about everything that was all of the resources that were there for me, the opportunities that were within the hospital that I can advance toward. It took a good friend of mine coming to me saying, "Hey, I think you would be great at this role. We have a position open, and I would really like for you to apply to it." And that's when I'm like, it's that simple, it's that easy. I can just apply to this and work with you for the interview. And she was like, yeah, apply for it. We'll do the interview. So that's when I did. And my manager did support me after the fact. They told me they were happy for me and they wanted to see me be successful and things like that. But I didn't have that talk with my manager before. I never had the experience of speaking with my manager about going within the hospital.
Thank you, Cornisha. And I think that's something that we saw a bit in the report as well is employers who want to do the right thing and want to create advancement pathways oftentimes think that these conversations are happening more frequently than they are through formal mechanisms, whether it be through conversations with human resources or your manager, but oftentimes it might be finding that friend inside the company or an informal mentor who's going to let you know about an opportunity. So, with that, I think one thing that I found very fascinating on a related note was the disparity between employers and employees in terms of perceptions, both of what communication was happening as well as what resources are available. So, for example, only 17% of frontline employees reported having frequent career advancement discussions, although nearly 40% of employers said the same. Similarly, employers reported significantly higher availability of resources than what workers reported, as Andrew mentioned. So I'll list off a few of those statistics again. So employers overestimated their workers knowing about training by 18 percentage points, tuition reimbursement by 14 percentage points, and the written description of expectations by 9 percentage points. So, Andrew, you work with companies a lot. So, I'm curious, based off of what we found in the report, how can employers better engage with their frontline employees to ensure that they're bridging the communication and availability gap?
Yeah. So it's a great question, and it definitely the statistics that came out in the report mirror exactly what I see, which is when you talk or when I talk with frontline employees, um, The jobs on a day-to-day basis are incredibly busy. Folks come in, they work really hard, they're fighting fires, and they leave. When you ask folks just how frequently they actually talk to their manager about anything other than what type of job am I doing, what tasks should I be doing, how can I go and help out with XYZ, it's pretty limited after that. And if and when I ask somebody, hey, how frequently have you actually talked to somebody above your manager? So again, I do mostly retail work, so I'll talk about retail. But if it's not your store manager, somebody within field HR, somebody within corporate, the answer is even smaller. So a couple of things that I see that could be really, really helpful. The first is we know that folks who continue to get better training and feel better about the jobs that they're doing want to advance at higher rates. It would really, really help everybody to instill in your frontline manager population some sort of expectation that they have a conversation on a weekly or biweekly basis on how folks are doing and what resources they're pulling on. It can take 2 minutes, but even the simple response of, hey, I know that a couple of weeks ago you told me that you wanted to think about tuition reimbursement. Have you actually done that? Can I connect you with somebody who can help out with that? The more and more that we can integrate this into the daily ways of working and weekly ways of working is really critical. I think the second piece is most organizations do have some pretty formal channels for communicating with the field. Many don't have email, but many do have boards in the back of their rooms. A lot of folks don't have company telephones in these populations. So what are the channels that people go and listen to within these populations? It's very different in a call center where everybody's in front of a computer and has email than it is, again, within a retail store or an organization. So how do we utilize some of those channels to go and promote these? It would be great on a monthly basis. I saw a client recently who every month they say, hey, here's the 2 or 3 things that we think that everybody in the store needs to know about. It is a new training on ways of working with a new piece of technology. It is the new tuition reimbursement program, and it is the new flexible hours. Whatever those things are should get communicated on an ordinary basis. And then the third piece, which I think gets lost amongst everybody, myself included, with my teams, is just asking folks on the front line what they want and what they need. Because everybody's different. And that sounds overly simplistic. But what I see very frequently is employers think that the 10 things that they're doing that are so great for the population apply equally to everybody. Or there's enough of them out there that people will go and pick and choose what they want. I think by having a couple of conversations every once in a while with a bunch of people on the teams to say, hey, did you know about this? Did it matter to you? Okay, it didn't. What are the types of things that could actually matter more? Or for the people who use the programs, why did you use the programs? How did you learn about them? And how can we go and enable that with a broader group of people is really, really critical. So again, 3 things. 1, let's enable our managers to have more autonomy in having these conversations. 2, let's think about the ways that the corporate that more formal channels can be used to improve communications. And 3, let's just ask folks what they want and what they need.
Thank you so much for that, Andrew. Cornisha, I want to go back to you for a moment. A few minutes ago, you mentioned that when you were made aware of an advancement opportunity, your manager was very supportive of you in pursuing it. I'm curious, were there areas that you felt like your employer or manager could have been more receptive or helpful in your career pathway, or there were things that got in your way?
I could think of a thing, and Andrew just made me think of it when he talked about the tuition reimbursement and how a lot of employees doesn't like they don't know about it. So one of I'm sorry. So one of the things at the hospital that I worked at was the tuition reimbursement. Like they would talk about it repeatedly, but they never really showed you the steps and how to go about it, like what you needed to do. And when I went to my manager and told them, because I'm in school right now, I'm actually pursuing a bachelor's degree in psychology. But when I went to my manager about the class schedule, like, hey, I'm signing up for these classes. Let's work something out so that I'm able to do them, like with as far as my shift hours. And they didn't mention anything to me about the tuition reimbursement then and how to apply for it. And it took again another friend that had went through the same thing. They had to do the tuition reimbursement themselves. They were the ones that walked me through it and showed me how to do it. So I think that's the thing. Like I never like when I would need these things, like a helping hand in being walked through something because I didn't understand how to do it myself. I had to go to a coworker or a friend inside the department. I wasn't able to reach out to a manager to do it. So I think that was something that held me back. And as far as like transferring over to a different department, that was a whole process, which I kind of just said like in the back seat of it. I wasn't talked to like, hey, this is what's going on. It's gonna take this much time for you to switch over. This is what you need to do before. I kind of just like waited. I was like, hey, well, like what's happening with my transfer? Like, hey, what's happening with this? And I would just like work up until I just worked up until I switched over to the next department. So I think the lack of communication was like a barrier for me as far as getting my tuition reimbursement and transferring and advancing to the different department.
Thank you so much, Cornisha. You raised such an important issue where there's one piece that we talked about is just making sure that people are aware of various benefits. But wait, what I heard you say is it has to go beyond that. It's not just about awareness that a benefit exists, but it's really about how do you access that so that people don't bump into additional barriers in utilizing that benefit. So thank you so much for that. I want to stick with you for just a moment. Earlier, Andrew talked about 5 different categories of where employers could effectively levers that employers have to make changes to do a better job of advancing frontline talent. So that included clear and frequent communication, leveraging and growing workers' skills, creating supportive managers, aligning frontline worker incentives with their priorities, and tapping into motivated talent pools. Now, there's a lot of different things we know that employers can do, but I'm gonna ask you a hard question, and this is gonna go to you, Andrew, afterwards, which is if you had to bring it down to one piece of advice for employers, and there are many on this call today, what if you can give them one piece of advice on what they could change to improve upward mobility for frontline employees, what would it be? Let's start with Cornisha and then go over to Andrew.
I think that's a great question. I think the 2 things that I talked about earlier would be great. But the main thing for me, I would say, is communicating with your team and taking what they say seriously, like checking in with them to see what their future career goals are. Because a lot of people, like myself, like they want to advance. They don't want to continue working the same job like for the rest of their life. They don't like want to see their job, what they do every day, as a job. Like they want to do something different. So just like getting to know who you're working with and seeing what they want to do in the future and making sure like everything that they're doing aligns with that somehow, like making sure they're taking the necessary steps and helping them out and supporting them through that so they could so it would be an easy shift when they do finally decide to move up, or if they do finally decide to leave the company, to make sure they're like they have everything that they need to succeed. Like getting to know the people that you're working with and like making sure they have the proper tools to succeed. I think that would be the advice that I give them.
Thank you, Cornisha. Over to you, Andrew. Same question.
Yeah, no, it's a great question, Cornisha. Thank you so much. And ordinarily, I would say it depends, or I'd give a few answers, but I'm going to just give one. I'm actually going to respond to the question properly. I'm going to lean into the fact that the number one thing that frontline workers say that they want is advancement opportunities and new opportunities. And the number one piece of advice that I give lots of folks that I work with is how do you think about giving people step up opportunities or abilities to have more responsibility in the day-to-day work that they're doing right now? There are 2 major things that helps with, both of which came through in the research. Thing one, everybody wants more responsibility, or 70+% of people want more responsibility. So you're immediately leaning into something that your work population really wants and is desiring and will give them both happiness, satisfaction, etc. And thing 2, we talked a bit about the fact that having an aligned skill set or knowing what you're doing and knowing that you're going to do a good job matters. There's no better way of doing that than by giving people stretch opportunities to go above and beyond. So I'll give you a couple of real examples that I've seen that are simple, but hopefully can bring a point to this. In one of the companies that I work with, we actually realized that the assistant manager and some of the hourly population had said that they want additional responsibilities. So we problem solved and we thought about, hey, what are the types of things that we can go and help them grow with? So the manager actually said, look, hey, assistant, why don't you go and help me write the schedule for this week? It's something that's simple, but it's something that's hard. And it's something that, of course, that manager had to go and coach on. But after we did this time and time again with assistant managers and populations that really wanted this, their happiness went up, their ability to go and do a good job in their next role went up. So that's one. Two, there's a bunch of different places where a lot of my clients work to try to cross-train folks that are interested in other parts of the job. So you might say, look, I'm a salesperson within a department store, but one of the big things that's recently popped up is all of the new supply chain things that come in the back room, and how do I go and stock the shelves, and how do I go and help out the backroom manager to go and make life easier? Why don't we give them half a shift every couple weeks to go and learn that and figure out another part of the business that does a couple things? One, again, most importantly, people want this and want to have more responsibility. So it gives that individual more meaning within their day-to-day. Two, it gives them confidence that they can go and do more jobs, and that there's more out there within that organization than they currently have. And then three, I've always found that giving everybody, myself included, more rounding in terms of learning other parts of the business really helps within your current job. So you might be a salesperson who gets a lot of questions about why things are out of stock, and you might not actually know. When you actually go and work in the back room for half a day, you'll realize what actually goes on back there, and you'll have a better response when you're actually dealing with a customer. So on the job advancement and training opportunities is my one.
Thanks so much, Andrew. And I think what that also hits on is not just the importance of advancement opportunity when we think of upward mobility, but even the ability for employers to align the jobs with the skills that their employees have, or the skills that they want to have. I know in my own experience, the jobs I've liked the most are the jobs where I feel like I can contribute the most. They're aligned with my skills, and that's consistent with everyone else I know as well. And so I think too, the other thing that struck me that you had mentioned earlier, as I think about advancement, when we sought out to do this study, it was really focused on how can we crack the nut on helping ensure that people who are motivated to advance have the opportunity to do so. But one of the things that we found, as you alluded to earlier, is that this is not just about advancement, it's also about who companies are bringing into their firms. So you talked about how one of the major findings was that people who've been involved in the criminal justice system are not only more likely to apply, but more likely to be successful in achieving advancement opportunities. Not only that, they're also more likely to invest in upskilling by 16 percentage points. And this is true across other demographic characteristics that we surveyed. So this is across race, this is across gender. The report also highlighted how this is true among people who've been skilled through alternative routes. So think about people who may have gained skills, but didn't get it through that 4-year degree that so often employers lean on as a proxy for someone who is prepared to succeed in the workforce. And so for me, as I think about some of the main takeaways of this report, a lot of it is focused on advancement, but it also has a key takeaway here too around talent pipelines, on who companies are looking at when they are sourcing candidates, when they're looking for highly motivated talent pools. So we are getting close to wrapping up our panel today, but we did get a question from the audience, and this question goes over to you, Cornisha. So Cornisha, a question we have is, what career advancement resources did you know about before you started your conversation with your friend about the new job?
I believe that that's a great question. So the career advancement opportunities or resources that I knew about was that you can just apply for a job. I want to say, like, you can go on a website and apply. That's what I knew about. Like, you could just fill out an application.
Thank you so much for that. With that, I'm going to close out our panel today. So first, I just want to thank you, Cornisha, and congratulate you for so much success on the job. I know you've not only received one promotion, but you've also received another new job. So congratulations for everything that you've achieved on the job. And thank you, Andrew, for all of the work that you did and insights that you brought out from the employer perspective in this work. As everyone here knows, we at Cara Plus, we are working with people like Cornisha every day who represent the front line, and we are working with people like Andrew every day who represent employers who are both trying to fix fix this challenge? How do we get motivated people into our companies and to stick and stay? If you're interested in learning more about this, feel free to reach out to our team. This recording will also be available on YouTube, so feel free to share this with your network if it resonates at all. So thank you all so much for attending, and we look forward to chatting with you soon. Take care.